What's up, guys? Mr. Garrow here again. Got a quick video today, another one of our skills videos. Today we're going to look at argumentative writing and really the note-taking process for your assignments in your social studies class during this remote learning time. Okay. Normally, we would be able to deliver this note-taking lesson together, and you'd have an opportunity to practice note-taking with us in a classroom together. Obviously, things are a little different, so we're going to try and use this as a way to clarify and make things a little easier to understand about what I expect in the note portions of your assignments and how to do that effectively when reading a historical text, which is what you're going to be looking at, right? You're going to be reading about historical events and reading articles, primary sources, quotes, things like that about those historical events and issues, and how we want you to take notes on those on your assignments so that you can have a successful argumentative write in the long run. Okay, so we're going to look at today some of the things that we look for in a historical document note-taking situation for argumentative writing assignment. All right, so the first thing that you should know is that I follow the old historian, the old historian 6 W's, okay? Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And ultimately, I believe that when you're doing your historical research and you're reading about the events, if you can answer these questions, you're going to be able to form an opinion about that event or that issue and be able to convince the reader of your argument that they should agree with you because you're able to answer all of these things and explain it to them. And so those are the 6 things that we try to make sure that we cover in our note-taking when we're reading these historical documents, okay? So for today, we're going to be looking at an issues and controversies article, just like you would be on a normal assignment. We're going to be using today the Salem witch trials. It's just an event in history from the 1600s in America, well, before America was America in the New World. And we're just going to look at that event and try to show you how to do this, who, what, where, when, why, and how, so that it's an example for you as you're going through your own reading and note-taking, okay? A couple of things to note. We want you to search for evidence, right? And evidence being what were the people saying, doing, thinking, when was it happening? All of those factual things, right? Not opinions, but factual evidence of what occurred, who did it, where did it happen, when, why, and how. And that's evidence. That evidence is what is going to convince the reader to agree with you when you get to the argumentative write, when you're writing that paragraph or that essay, whatever it is. Okay? The 6 W's will help you clarify it and formulate your argument, and it gives you a better understanding of the issue, what happened, the issue itself, and the rationale behind the response to the issue or whatever the event might have been. Okay? So we're going to take a look at that today. Just as a reminder, okay, on your assignments, typically you're going to have boxes like this, right? You're going to have a table on your assignment, and it's going to ask you to read an article, and then it's going to ask you to provide evidence about that article that these guys are using to support their argument. And to do that, that's where you're going to answer the 6 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And by including that information, you're going to have a full understanding of that argument. And then you're going to take that information here, right, and you're going to craft it into a 3 to 5 sentence summary over here, okay, in this box on this side. And then any additional questions that you might have after reading it about the incident or the issue, you would type those questions below. But today we're going to focus here on the note-taking, okay? The stuff over on this side and what that's going to look like, okay? When you look at an issues and controversies article, you're going to get a bunch of links, timelines, background on the issue, and then importantly, you're going to get the 2 arguments, right? A case for and a case against, or the argument for something or the argument against something. And those are where you're going to take those notes, okay? And the notes are going to be used to help you basically come to a decision. Who do you agree with and why on that issue? And then you can formulate an argument and write it out to convince me, okay? So the issue here was basically in the 1600s, 1692, in a place called Salem, Massachusetts. A whole bunch of people were put on trial for being witches. They were accused of witchcraft, and many people were put to death. Right? They were actually hanged and put to death as a result of being found guilty of witchcraft. And so the issue is, was the trial and the death sentence actually because people believed in witchcraft, or were people doing it for other reasons and just using witchcraft to cover up the true reasons behind wanting to get these people in trouble? And so that is the issue, and you're going to read the arguments behind those issues for the assignment, okay? And so the first thing that we would try to do is we want to figure out who is involved in this, okay? So what people are the main figures in the issues? And I want to make sure that you understand it doesn't have to be a single person. It might be 2 or 3 people, and then it might be a small group of people. Maybe it's a group of friends or something. Okay, maybe it's a large group of people, an entire church, or an entire group of blacksmiths or something. Maybe it's an entire community, right? An entire group within a city that is the main figure in the issue. And it could be all of those things at once, right? There could be a couple important people, a couple of groups that are needed, and then maybe even an entire community. And the idea is that you need to figure out who those various people and groups are and make note of their names, their role, right? Why do we care who they are? And any other information about their impact, right? If they're not important enough to know their name and their role, then you probably don't need to make note of them. But if they're an important factor in the issue, you do need to make note of them. And again, it could be an individual person. It could be John Smith, or it could be a group of people, or it could be both. And so you want to make sure that you include whoever those people are that are the main figures in the issue. Okay. The second thing you're going to look at is the what piece. Okay. So what is the argument they're putting forward here? Okay. There's a case for and a case against in these issues. And what I wanted to show you here, basically, what is the case for the people being hanged as witches and dying because of actual witchcraft versus the other side? And so after reading the article, I understand that, okay, so the case for witchcraft as being legitimate was that people at the time were exhibiting what they believed were the known symptoms of witchcraft, and thus the only logical choice was to call them witches and put them on trial and have them murdered. The case against that was that people were tried and hanged as witches because of actually things like rivalries or jealousy within the community. Maybe you didn't like someone and you accused them of being a witch to kind of get them, get back at them or teach them a lesson or something like that. And so the argument on either side is, one, people were legitimate in their beliefs of witchcraft and they definitely died because people thought they were witches. Or two, people just used the idea of witchcraft to get at their enemies, more or less, right? So that was what the arguments are. Okay. The where piece is relatively self-explanatory, right? Where is this taking place? And then tell me what impact does that location actually have on the issue? Okay. So obviously in this instance, the Salem witch trials were happening in Salem, Massachusetts. Okay. But that's not the only thing I'm going to write down. Okay. When I'm taking my notes, I'm going to make note that yes, it happened in Salem, Massachusetts, but also that this was a Puritan village, a very religious, very strict, very, very religious and strict village in Massachusetts. And that has an impact. Okay. And I'm also going to make note that in my readings, I see that it's not the first place in the New World to have a witch issue, but it was the one who had the biggest issue, right? It was the largest scale of the time. So I want to make sure that I make note of those important factors about where, so that I can come back and reference them later in my argumentative write. All right. The next piece of it is the when piece. Okay. And again, seems pretty self-explanatory, right? When did this happen? Okay. But we also need to make note of how that time could have had an impact on the issue. Okay. So in this instance, the when is the year 1692. Okay. And the reason that's important is because medical science, as we know it today, was not developed at that time. You have to remember that back then, they didn't understand germs. They didn't understand a lot of the other issues and things that we today take for granted about medicine. Okay. And so uh, in my reading, I recognized that one of the common responses back then to symptoms they didn't understand was, well, just it must be the devil, it must be witchcraft. And so I would make sure to make note of that because that was a common response in the 1600s and before. I also noticed when reading the articles that witchcraft trials had been happening in Europe for hundreds of years before this time. And so I'm going to make sure that I note not only the specific time when it happened, right? Not just the year or the date, but also the impact that year or date has on the issue, right? And in this instance, it's important to note that these witchcraft trials have been happening for a really long time before medical science wasn't there. And so you have to take that into consideration when you're reading the arguments and formulating your own opinion on the issue. Okay? The next one is the why piece. And why is kind of a broad part. Okay? It's a broad area. You're basically going to tell us why do you think the event or issue happened according to their argument, right? So if you believe that it was legitimate and people really thought they were witches and killed them because of their true belief in witchcraft, put them on trial, killed them, and they were doing what they thought was right and they had the best intentions in their heart, then you're going to tell us why they believe that, okay? And so in reading that article, I recognized that the Puritan people believed in a very literal, that means like totally believed every word of the Bible, and that devils and witchcraft were totally real. Their community was absolutely 100% behind the literal interpretation of the Bible. And that has an impact on how people are going to see these issues, right? They are living in a society that that clearly has supported these ideas and believes in them. Okay? There's also the other aspect, as I was reading it, that I noticed people believed that if you were denying that witches existed, you were essentially denying the devil, which would be denying the Bible, which would be heresy, right? That would call you be a crazy person. And then at that point, you are, working for the devil, essentially. And so, people's why in this instance, they had to believe in witches because if you didn't, and you made that publicly known, there was a good chance that you yourself could be accused. Okay. Another instance I saw here, another piece of information I saw while reading the text about why was that there were symptoms being exhibited by some people in the community, right? Hallucinations, screaming, potentially convulsions, and their lack of medical understanding in 1692, they couldn't explain that. They had no logical explanation for why somebody would be having those issues. Today, we understand mental health much better. But back then, they had no way of understanding it. And so the symptoms that people were exhibiting couldn't be explained. And so the easiest possible reason to explain away those symptoms, explain away their actions is, of course, witchcraft and the devil, right? And so why did the event issue happen? Well, for all of these reasons, they believe that people were sincere in their belief in witchcraft and that's why they put them on trial and ended up killing so many people. Obviously, there's the other side of the argument. If you read the other, half of it, which is going to say, well, the real reason they did this is because they were jealous of their neighbors. They wanted their land. They needed, the extra space. They, were getting rid of rivals, whatever the issue might be. And that witchcraft was just a cover for the issue. But the reality is that I'm only in this instance, in this part of my note taking, I'm only concerned with this argument, right? The argument for why they were true in their beliefs and why they actually, believed it. And so that's what I'm taking notes on here. And then the next piece, of course, is the how. Okay, and this is kind of the nuts and bolts of the issue from that perspective. So how did it occur? They put 200 people on trial over the course of many months, and they ended up killing 24 of them. And they accused them of witchcraft for these exhibiting these symptoms. But I also want to note that how this took place was these people were put on trial, but they were not trials as we know them today, right? We know today that if you get arrested and you go to court, you're supposed to have a lawyer and you're supposed to have a judge, and it's supposed to follow rules and be fair. They were not executed that way back then. And so I found a quote in my reading of this argument, and I thought was really, really important to take note of, which was those people accused of witchcraft really only had two options of defense, right? They could confess to it. Oh, yes, I am a witch. And then somehow hopefully be saved. Or they could go to trial. And back then, the court system accepted evidence that was kind of crazy, right? Like I could have claimed that so-and-so is a witch and I saw them visit me in a dream at night with their evil spirit and put a hex on me or something. And that would be accepted as legitimate evidence. There were also no defense lawyers. So if you get arrested for witchcraft, you don't have anybody defending you. It's just you. And so if you ended up choosing to go to trial to try to clear your name, it was pretty likely that you were going to be found guilty and executed. And so in this instance, right, that's an important fact, because when I read the other articles and I'm reading about the other issues, I want to make sure that I understand the way that trials worked and how it really wasn't set up to be fair, especially to those who were accused. All right. And so what I would do is I would add those notes right into this box as I was reading the articles, reading the arguments, right? And I would just be typing those things in. They could be bullet points. They could be direct quotes you could copy and paste quotes, because really what we're doing here is we're just trying to get an understanding of the issue, right? We're trying to get an understanding of the argument. So who, what, where, when, why, and how, and I'm just going to add those notes in there, okay? Then on the left side here, after I've taken all of my notes, okay, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type a quick summary, right? A couple sentences. And basically, I'm going to take this information over here and I'm going to try to combine it all together to create a couple sentences summarizing the argument, right? Telling you who's involved, what happened, where it happened, when it happened, and then the whys and the hows. And I'm going to try and do that in, 3, 4, 5 sentences to break it down and make it simple, okay? That's important because really that is going to be my summary of all of the evidence that they presented. And more or less, it should represent kind of the way I see the issue, right? Then after I've typed my summary, I'm going to go right down here where it says you can type any questions you have. And in that point, if I was reading the article and I thought to myself, man, that's super weird, this doesn't make any sense, or I don't really understand that part, I would just make a note of it, right? And I would use that question to help me either go research further. Maybe I will get the answer to that question as I read more articles, or maybe I need to ask that question in my classroom Google Meet, right? And I need to get some clarification from a teacher or one of my classmates. All right. The last thing that I want to do for this short tutorial is just talk real quick about a couple other tips and tricks when you're taking these notes and reading these historical texts. First, use quotes, guys. Okay? When you're taking notes on the 6 W's, who, what, where, when, why, and how, copy and paste from the text, right from the Issues and Controversies article. Add them to your notes and bullet points. You will be able to use those quotes later in your argumentative rights, in your paragraphs or essays, whatever that might be. There's no reason not to. You are going to have to obviously give credit to the author, but that's fine because I've already given you the source and you're going to use that source anyway. Okay? And then the second thing is, remember that when you're reading and taking notes, you're forming your own opinion on the issues as well. Okay? That shouldn't be in the notes though, right? You shouldn't be giving me your opinion in the notes. You need to be giving me the evidence. What do you read in there? What does it say in the article about the issue or event. You will share your opinion when you try to convince me which side is correct and which is incorrect in the argumentative write at the end, whether that's 1 paragraph, 3 paragraph, 5 paragraphs, whatever the essay is at the end of the assignments. And that's where you will share your opinion. So the note taking is separate from where your opinion comes in. All right. All right. So that's it for my short note-taking argumentative write tutorial for your assignments. Hope it was helpful. As always, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again. Take care and go Rams.